Hey everybody, in this video we are going to talk about one of Indianapolis' most popular suburbs on the north side, Westfield. And we're going to get into the pros and the cons of living there. It certainly has a lot of things going for it, but it also has a few things that aren't so good necessarily about it. So stay tuned. Hey everybody, I'm Jason Compton with the Compton Home Group. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time to the channel and you want to know everything there is to know about a place like Westfield, Indiana, or any of the Indianapolis metropolitan area, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap the little bell so you're notified every time we do a new video each and every week. Now we get texts and calls and emails from people all over the Indy Metro and all over the country with questions about places like Westfield, places like Indianapolis, and any of the surrounding areas. So if you have questions at all, then don't hesitate to reach out to us because we'll always have your back with those questions, and we'll always have your back when it comes for your time to make your move to or within the Indy Metro. So today we're digging deep on Westfield, Indiana, which happens to be a very highly rated suburb on the north side. It's pretty close to a couple other highly rated suburbs as well, of Carmel and Fishers, and you've got Zionsville up on the north side. You've also got Noblesville up on the north side too. So Westfield is really the furthest north, and like I said, extremely highly rated. So it has a lot of pros going for it. And just like any city or across the entire country, or any small town across the entire country, you can probably find positives for living there. But you also have some negatives, some cons. So we're going to get into those. Now, this pros and cons list are some of the things that you might not be able to research as easily just across the internet, just to try to figure out some information. So this kind of dives a little bit deeper into a little bit more about some of the unexpected pros, some of them, and then some of the unexpected cons. So it takes a little bit of experience maybe to develop the awareness of those pros and cons. So we're going to go through 3 pros and 3 cons for Westfield, Indiana. So pro number 1 is the thing that is probably the least surprising and the easiest to find, is the fact that the quality of life in Westfield is exceptionally high. They have, and of course the things that make up that quality of life, it's just the schools there are extremely high. The economy is doing very, very well in Westfield. So it has a lot of things going for it. So if you're a young family or a family that's pretty established with your kids and you're moving into Westfield, then schools are going to be a big concern for you. So Westfield has some of the best schools in the entire area, and there's some of the best public schools in the entire state. Extremely family friendly and family focused as far as that's concerned. But one of the biggest things that would kind of indicate to you that they're pretty family friendly and focused on kids and youth is the fact that Grand Park has been built in Westfield. It is the largest youth sports complex in the entire country. It has 26 baseball and softball fields. It has 31, I think, multi-purpose fields, so they could be used for lacrosse, soccer, football, field hockey, obviously a number of different sports. It has a huge indoor event facility it's one of the biggest buildings really that I've ever been in or seen, with 3 enormous multi-purpose fields on the inside. There's a basketball complex as well with basketball courts. There's also over 10 miles of trails actually going through and around the park. Some of them can help you connect from one side of the park to the other to get there a little more easily. Plus the Monon Trail, which goes from essentially downtown Indianapolis all the way through Indianapolis to the north and through Carmel, through Westfield, and north of Westfield. One of the trailheads for the Monon Trail is right there at Grand Park. Also, it's a place with some notoriety locally. The Colts, they signed I think a 10-year contract to have their training camp there at Grand Park, and I think that just started back in 2017, so it's got a long way to go. So it is a phenomenal, unbelievably huge facility. Really, really cool. And it's a place that's busy. It gets over 1 million, well over 1 million visits every single year. So it has a lot going on. So the focus there on family in Westfield is pretty intense. Now, Grand Park, places like that, it actually brings us to number 2 as far as the pros of living in Westfield, Indiana, and the fact that it's just a nice place. But what I mean by that is that it is nice looking, and also the infrastructure in Westfield is exceptionally nice. Now the suburb just to the south, Carmel, it has kind of led the way at some major infrastructure improvements. And the most notable thing that you're going to find in Carmel, other than the fact when you're driving through it, just how nice it is and how nice looking it is how many roundabouts Carmel actually has. It has the most roundabouts of any city in the entire country, well over 100, which is a pretty intense number for a city that has only 100,000 people in it. But some of the other suburbs have kind of followed suit, and Westfield has done an exceptional job at that. So Westfield is not a huge place, of course, but it is growing, and it's got that vision in mind, making it a really pretty place to live. So the roads, the ease of getting around, and just the way things look in general is certainly up at the top of their list. And so places like Grand Park and the tourism and the dollars that it brings in each and every year can allow for a lot of those infrastructure improvements. So you're going to see a lot of those happening from now for years to come, and we've seen Westfield grow up tremendously over the past 10 and 20 years. And we've done a phenomenal job at making it look very, very nice, and the whole experience of being in Westfield a really great one too. Now the third pro of living in Westfield is something that you might notice after being there for a little while. So Westfield, not a huge place, with its population being just a little bit over 40,000. But if you look back in the year 2000, there's just over 9,000 people there. So it has definitely grown a lot. But not a big place, although geographically, it's actually fairly large. You know, especially when you compare the geographic area for Westfield to Carmel and Fishers, which are both near 100,000 people apiece or so. It's pretty big. So when you get into a larger geographic space, or at least what feels to be a larger geographic space, and there aren't as many people there, it doesn't feel that crowded. Westfield is right now not exceptionally crowded. They're kind of poised for the growth that they're going to see over the next 10 and 20 years. But at this point, that's kind of a pro. You get down in Indianapolis or Carmel or Fishers, it's not like it's wildly crowded, New York City style or anything like that, but it's definitely more dense. You have a lot more people living in the same size area, essentially. But Westfield, geographically, not quite as big as Carmel and Fishers, but it is a pretty good size. It makes up a very big percentage of that geographic area. So not exceptionally crowded just yet, and it's going to take a little while for it to actually feel like it's a lot more dense. So when you get down to the edges of Westfield especially, it can feel really sparse and not very dense at all, which I feel like is a pro. It's not necessarily a pro for everybody. It could be a con for you, but a lot of times people are moving to a place like Westfield to get away from a lot of the density that they felt in the place that they previously lived. So now we move on to the cons for living in Westfield, Indiana. And number one, kind of I would say the most glaring thing to somebody to just plunk down a map, took a look at where Westfield is in relation to Indianapolis and maybe quite a few other things around the area, is that it is really far north. And in fact, you can get into southern Westfield, which is close to 146th Street, and that's kind of the dividing line between Westfield to the north and Carmel to the south. And then when you go south of that to get to the southern border of Carmel at around 96th Street or so is where it generally is before you get into Indianapolis. So when you're up in Westfield, especially mid to northern Westfield, that is pretty far north. It's definitely up there. And so if you work in Westfield, or you work from home, or you work, let's say, in Carmel or Fishers nearby, that's probably not that big a deal. But if you work somewhere in the city of Indianapolis, or especially downtown Indianapolis, and I do know some people that live in Westfield and they work downtown, and their commute is long. I mean, just on a really, really good day from northern Westfield all the way to downtown Indianapolis, the most direct route is to take US 31 straight south right into downtown. Or you could come to 465 and swing it over to the west and take I-65 into downtown. Or you can just swing around the east side of Indianapolis on 465 and then catch I-70 westbound into downtown. Those ways are amazingly kind of out of the way to go to catch the interstates, but sometimes they can save you just a little bit of time, because going down US 31, especially when you get into Indianapolis, the traffic is going to get a little bit heavier, and you're going to hit some more stoplights for sure. Now, US 31's gone through a lot of improvements over the past 5 years or so, and they removed a lot of stoplights. So that commute 10 years ago used to be much worse than it is today. So going from Westfield, at least all the way down to Indianapolis, it's a lot smoother. It's a much smoother ride, as you can get to go over the top of a lot of those cross streets, cross-numbered streets, and not have to worry about stopping at all. But it is still, from a mileage perspective, out there. And it's not always something that people think about until they get out there and experience that drive back and forth or test it out a little bit. So if you're fresh to the area, a lot of big cities have their suburbs, and they've got their far out there suburbs. Westfield's kind of that far out there suburb, even though when you drive into it, it may not feel like it because it's all so connected. The mileage, it's definitely there. So I would consider that a con, especially if you need that connection to Indianapolis. So con number 2 is that Westfield is growing, and that's not the con, but it is growing, and so there's going to be a lot of construction going on in Westfield, and the downtown area of Westfield, exceptionally small. When you drive through it, I mean, it's tiny, so you can drive through it pretty fast, but it is going through a major redevelopment and improvement, and it's going to be quite a while before that's finished. So right now, as it is, Westfield is kind of lacking a cultural center. It's a little bit spread out, and it has some pockets here and there where some things are going on, but the true downtown area, which there is a very big vision for, and it's going to be exceptionally cool whenever it's completely finished, that is a little far down the road. So you're going to have some patience if you're moving into Westfield right now, and wait a few years for that to happen. But on the other hand, that can also be exciting for people too, in watching that development. But Westfield is a place that's growing and has been growing rapidly. So back in 2000, like I said before, there's only a little over 9,000 people there, so 20 years ago. And now that's over 40,000, and the growth is continuing. So you have to kind of just understand that there will be construction and projects and new ideas and development going on during periods like that to accommodate the growth. So that brings us to con number 3, and it kind of ties back into that second one there. You got a lot of new construction. If you go through Westfield, you can find some older homes, no question about that, but most of the homes, a heck of a lot of them, are under 20 years old. So there's a lot of new construction homes, a lot of new developing neighborhoods coming into Westfield, and what's being affected the most from all of that is the affordability, because Westfield does have some less expensive homes, but those really, for the most part, the majority of them are the older ones. Those are some of them that were built right around that 2000 mark or so, and maybe just a little bit past the year 2000. Most of your newer homes and most of the new construction in Westfield, they are not cheap homes. It is very clear that the goal is to make Westfield a premier community and an extremely nice place to live. So that line, that doorstep to get into Westfield 20 years ago wasn't all that high, but it has increased so fast to the point now where it is going to be an affordability issue getting into Westfield. It's one of the places where if you have less than $300,000 to spend, I would say Carmel is pretty much out. Very, very rare opportunities. Fishers is getting close to being almost out with a few opportunities here and there, and Westfield is right on its heels. But with the growth that we're seeing there, and the amount of new construction, the amount of new homes going in, high-end, really nice homes, it is rapidly increasing. So certainly a con as far as affordability is concerned. So there you have 3 pros and 3 cons about living in Westfield. If you have any questions at all about living in Westfield, Indiana, or any of the surrounding Indianapolis metro, then don't hesitate to reach out. And until the next one, We'll see you later.